Is Rafa Bejar. I'm Director of Outreach for the Texas Public Policy Foundation, and bienvenido and welcome to the Texas Public Policy Foundation's Hispanic Heritage event, Charla, where we're going to have a chat and a discussion about the issues that affect the Texas Hispanic community with some of the very top level Hispanic conservative leaders here operating in the state of Texas. Unfortunately, I need to inform everybody that we're going to have a little bit of a change in our program because the gremlins came in and kind of monkeyed with things, and unfortunately, we were going to start with Congresswoman Mayra Flores, and who was very excited to participate with us, but she's in Washington, D.C., and she was going to participate with us via Zoom. But unfortunately, the Nancy Pelosi and the liberals have decided to schedule the vote of continue funding the government at the same time, which is, I guess it's important in some way. And that so unfortunately, she's not going to be able to attend. So we unfortunately are not going to be able to include her in the program for today. And we also had another one of the guests of the panelists that was unfortunately unable to join us because his flight was canceled from Lubbock, and that's Abraham Enríquez from Bienvenido. And he sends his regrets, and he's somebody who's been very active in the movement and definitely wanted to participate with us. But unfortunately, he is not able to. But we're going to continue on because the work continues on, right? The conservative movement continues on. And and the exciting things that are happening within the Hispanic community in Texas is continuing. So before we begin and introduce the stellar panel that we have of my friends and colleagues, I want to first clarify a few points of terminology that I'm going to be using. Okay. And because I want to make sure that nobody gets any belly aches about some of the terms that I may be using. First of all, I'm going to be using the word Hispanic, okay? And I'm using that as a collective term, as a representation of people of many different national background origins that all share similarities in cultural backgrounds, traditions, and values. Okay. Obviously, we all know that there's no one thing as a Hispanic. Hispanics are made up. It's a composite term made up of many different people, and that also that we all are very proud to be Texans and very proud to be Americans. But we're going to be using the term Hispanic. Second of all, Hispanic Heritage Month. So this was created, for those of you that may not know, by President Ronald Reagan. And it was specifically created to help highlight and celebrate the very positive accomplishments and contributions made by American Hispanics here in this country. So they came up with this Hispanic Heritage Month. Now, of course, we being Texans, we celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month 24/7, 365, because Texas has about 40% Hispanic population. And not only that, but we have families that have been in Texas since before the arrival of the Mayflower. So we celebrate Hispanic heritage every single day. And then the last term that I want to just clarify is the term of Hispanic Texas, right? This is a discussion on the state of Hispanic Texas, and I don't want anybody to get bent out of shape. We all know that there's one Texas. It's unique, and that we are all very proud to be Texan. But the reality of the matter is that not all issues affect all people the same way. So we are here specifically gathered to talk about how issues specifically affect the Hispanic community. So that's why we're talking about Hispanic Texas. So I don't want anybody to take it the wrong way. But we do want to make that, that distinction. right? And there's some issues that have more impact on certain communities than others. And then obviously we're here together, gathered to talk about the Hispanic community. So with that being said, I want to transition now to our panel. We have just a tremendous panel here with us to share their insights on what's been happening in the Texas Hispanic community. These are people that have operated within the community for an extremely long time, and I'm very proud to call them my friends and colleagues. And these are people who I deal with on a very regular basis as we're going out and traveling the community and talking about the different issues that affect the Hispanic community. So with us, we have Alex Cestero, and he is the chairman of Hispanic Republicans of Texas and also their 501c3 organization, Hispanic Leadership Alliance. Alex is also the president and CEO of AccuFleet International. And he has over 20 years of experience in leadership and executive roles in a variety of industries and major corporations. He has been involved in the development of strategic growth and operational strategies at several multinational companies, particularly in areas of organizational transformation, product and service line expansions, acquisitions, and overall corporate development. And he earned his BA and MBA degrees from Rice University and his JD from Stanford University Law. He's a very accomplished attorney at law, and he comes to us from the Houston area. And then we have my good friend, Jorge Martinez. He is the Texas Coalition's director at the LIBRE Initiative and has served with various roles within the LIBRE Initiative since 2012. In 2015, he was appointed by Governor Greg Abbott to the Texas Physician Assistant Board and served on the Ethics and Disciplinary Committee. And George is a graduate of California State University, Fresno, where he received his Bachelor of Arts degree in communication, and he later earned his Master's of Public Administration from California Baptist University. So George and I worked together in the LIBRE Initiative before I came to work with the Texas Public Policy Foundation. He's a tremendous friend, and he comes to us from the Valley, from the McAllen area, where he lives with his wife and children, and he's going to be a new dad in a little while. So congratulations, George. So adding to the tribe. So, and then, and last but certainly not least in any stretch of the imagination is my good friend, Orlando Sanchez. So Orlando is the founder and president of Texas Latino Conservatives. Prior to that, Orlando was elected to Harris County Treasurer in November of 2006. He's the first immigrant to be chosen countywide by voters for a non-judicial office, and he served in that office until December of 2016, okay? And he was also the highest vote getter, and just incredible achievements. He graduated cum laude from the University of Houston with a degree in political science and embarked on a career as a public servant, first as a 3-term Houston City Council member, and then as Harris County Treasurer. So again, we have the best of the best here to talk about what's happening. So if you all give them a round of welcome. So before we get into the issues, and we're going to be talking about substantial issues, right? I mean, I know that the First Lady likes to just think that we're just a collection of breakfast tacos, but we're actually going to talk about issues here. But before we get into that, the meat of that discussion, I'd like for each one of our guests to explain a little bit about what they do in their respective organizations and some of the programs and projects that they've been working on. So Alex, you want to go ahead and start and tell us about the juggernaut that is HRT and Hispanic Leadership Alliance.
Good. Thank you, Rafa, and good afternoon, everybody. Buenas tardes. So we've got two sister organizations, but for simplicity, we'll talk about HRT, Hispanic Republicans of Texas. Been around about 13, 14 years. I joined the board about 6 years ago, and it was founded by a group of individuals, even going back to George P. Bush as one of the founders, looking at the underrepresentation of Hispanics in political office, particularly on the conservative side, statewide, right? So the original mission was locate, identify, train, recruit candidates who embrace conservative values. There wasn't really a machine or a mechanism at the time that HRT started this focus. It was probably at the forefront of this. There wasn't a lot of representation. So we've had quite a bit of success, added a federal PAC as well, but really always rooted around, certainly for about the first decade, around candidates. We did a pivot a couple of years ago, sort of trying to build on that after a lot of strategy discussions, saying, it's not only the candidates, but, what's the goal to increase conservative voting turnouts, and again, locked in on Hispanics. So we've gone beyond, candidates. We've also looked at issues and really kind of creating a community. I think we'll get into that today, but it's a disparate group that calls itself Hispanics in Texas, not just even, across the board, but also the conservative side. So how you approach that, has been part of a lot of our discussions the last few years. Right now we're pushing 300,000 active recipients and members, if you will, of our organization. And along that journey, there have been additional groups that have come in, right? So it was a very barren area, I'd say, 12, 15 years ago. And people kind of get it now, how important conservatives in the Hispanic ranks are, and how important Hispanics are to conservatives. So that's been a little bit of our evolution.
Yeah, and certainly Texas is a big enough state where, not one organization can handle all of it, right? And we definitely need more participation of very active and conscientious people such as yourself. So that's HRT, but then you also have the 501c3 Hispanic Leadership Alliance. Why don't you tell us about that?
C3 Hispanic Leadership Alliance Foundation, and HLA, the C4, that really is not candidate focused, but issues and education focused. So if you looked at our website, Hispanic Leadership Alliance, we have a series of videos there. That was one of our campaigns that we started a few years ago to really educate the general population, Hispanics in particular, on issues, right? Everything ranging from the energy industry, and now we're seeing it, right, big time, right, with gas inflation and energy crises, how the tax system works, and other things that really need to be core to any educated voter. But obviously we come at it from the conservative side. So that's HLA. So HLA more issues focused. HRT is a PAC focused on candidates. And
Perfect. George, why don't you tell the good folks about the great work that you guys have been doing with LIBRE over the years?
Thanks, Rafa. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. Rafa didn't mention this, but I am a refugee from the People's Republic of California. So you heard where I graduated and was educated. But I came here as soon as I could. It's been 8.5 years, so I am a proud Texan, Hispanic Texan at that. So the LIBRE Initiative reaches out to the U.S. Hispanic community so it can achieve its full potential. And we were founded in 2011 by Daniel Garza. He worked in the George W. Bush White House. Our headquarters is in Mission, Texas. So our field operations is in the Valley. And we started 11 years ago now. I've been with the organization for 10, talking about issues like Mr. Alex here said, on the policies that impact our lives every day. And we knew long ago it was going to take a long time to gain trust. And how do we build trust? We do it in a few ways. And one of them is connecting in meaningful ways. we want to build that trust. And how do you connect? Well, have a real relationship with people. And that's what we do. We hire folks on the ground that are from the community, that understand the culture, understand the values, and we relate. The other way is by creating diverse partnerships, like the organizations that are up here today. And even sometimes it's partnerships that we may not always agree with, but we agree on one issue that we can pass good policy on. So those are one of the ways that we connect and how we work in the community. And we focus on doing a lot of policy engagement also at the state and federal level. We were behind the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. We did some judicial stuff as well under the last administration. And at the state level, we were really pushing for property tax reform in 2019. So we use our grassroots organization and our volunteers to push lawmakers to get behind the bills that we think are good for the Hispanic community, like the property tax reform bill. So that's a little bit about what LIBRE Initiative does. We also have the C3, which is the LIBRE Institute, which strictly focuses on removing barriers to the Hispanic community. So what's that mean? What we have found is that Hispanics that we're talking to, sometimes they don't even know what the free market is. And we talk about free market principles, access to a market where you and I can sell, trade, produce without government interfering. Sometimes that's unrealistic to some folks that are here, maybe the first generation. They don't know how to speak English, maybe they don't have a driver's license, whatever the case may be. We use the LIBRE Institute to remove those barriers. So we'll partner with ESL teachers to teach English as a second language. We'll do civic courses, how to become a citizen to pass the test. There's a lot of areas where we do that. And we also do our goodwill stuff too, where we're cleaning up parks, where we're just giving away during the hurricane Hannah that went to the valley 2 years ago. And this is just an example. We've done more since then, but we gave out $1,000 of water because people had no running water, right? We partnered with Costco and did that. So that's a little bit about that. And then we also have separate to us a PAC, a 527, the LIBRE Initiative Action, which we can skip that for now.
Yeah. So, but why don't you go into a little bit, because you guys have actual operations across the state. Why don't you tell the folks a little bit where you all operate?
Thank you. Yeah. We have 8 field staff. There's 11 us in Texas. When I mean field staff, it's those that are actually on the ground building community. And then we have myself, a strategic director, and a supervisor of the field staff throughout Texas. So we have someone in McAllen office. I'm also based out of there, but I'm traveling all over. We have a person in Harlingen, which is next county over. We have Laredo, El Paso, Dallas, 2 in Houston, and San Antonio. So we're all over in the state. We are also across the country in 13 other states.
Great. Perfect. Just tremendous work that you all do. Now, Orlando, brother, you have just recently started TLC, Texas Latino Conservatives, and you've just been on fire. You've just been everywhere. Just, tell us about, your vision of TLC and the great work that you've been doing.
Well, thank you. I appreciate TPPF doing this. First of all, there's obviously an age disparity. These guys have a long runway, and given my age, I have a very short runway. So maybe that's why I'm on fire. My engines are starting to blow up. But I've been I too am a refugee. I'm an immigrant from Havana, Cuba. Immigrated here in 1962. I'm the first person in my family to get a college degree. My daughter has received 4 degrees, 2 undergraduate, 2 masters, and worked on a PhD at Ohio State University. And I look back, and I'm a kid that landed here when I was 4 years old, didn't even speak the language. And the idea that I get elected to be a city council member in the 4th largest city in America, the first Hispanic immigrant ever elected citywide in the city of Houston, and then ran for mayor of Houston in what still is the most historic race in the history of Houston, because we voted more people in the runoff than the general election. And then to be the first Hispanic immigrant ever elected countywide in the 3rd largest county in the United States. I have to pinch myself and I say, how many of you could move to Mexico City or to Tokyo or to Moscow and run for city council run for their county positions and run for mayor of their cities and be elected. Nowhere but America. Nowhere but America does anybody that wants to fight and wants to be part of this great union and live under the most fabulous parchment ever created, which is the U.S. Constitution, have an opportunity to do that. And that's worth fighting for. And so maybe I'm on fire because, again, I'm a lot older than these guys and I don't have a lot of time, but it's critical. We, like HRT, are two organizations. We're a general purpose state PAC, and we are a nonprofit organization. We do a lot of things. I came here because my father was recruited by the former county judge of Harris County to be the first Spanish voice in Major League Baseball in 1962 for the Colt 45s. And one baseball term that's often used is building a farm team. Any of you that follow baseball, you know, every major league team has smaller teams around the country where young professional players come up the ranks. And so I thought that we should be building the farm team of Hispanic conservative leaders, which are going to be the leaders of the next generation of Texas. And if we didn't do that, we'd lose this state. And if we lost this state, we'd never elect another conservative to the executive branch of the federal government. And that to me was pretty shocking. And I was excited when George W. Bush won and beat Ann Richards, and I was looking at the Hispanic percentage that he was getting. But since then, the Hispanic participation, the conservative movement voting for Republicans started going downhill. And I thought to myself, you know, and I am sometimes can be a burr in the saddle, to use a Texas term, but, you know, conservatives sometimes are pretty good about snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. And, you know, they were sitting around. We had every statewide seat in Texas. There was no need to go into urban communities. And that's why we've lost Harris County in 2018. We've lost Dallas County. We've lost El Paso County. We've lost Tarrant County. Obviously, we've lost the People's Republic. And what you're seeing, and everybody's excited about it, the big realignment, the shift, is not, in my opinion, because of anything that any of us has done. It's because of the mistakes the Democrats have made. And so what they're selling, Latinos aren't buying. But it ain't going to happen long. The other side is a formidable opponent. And they're going to wake up and they're going to huddle and they're going to redraw their game plan. And we better be ready.
Right. And so again, and thank you for that, you know, for that great insight. But again, TPPF being a 501c3 organization, we're just talking about the landscape of conservatives versus liberals and why it's important, right? You know, these, you know, on the political side are the races, but it's not just about the teams, about Republican and Democrat. It's more about the issues, right? And about the values. And that's what, let's pivot and let's talk a little bit more about that, right? So earlier this year, TPPF foresaw some of the changes that were happening down, in the Valley. And we commissioned a Texas Hispanic poll in mid to late February. And one of the interesting things that we found was that there was a difference between partisanship identification and ideological identification within the Hispanic community. And again, this is a Texas-wide poll, right? It's not just focused on South Texas or just the urban part. This is a poll that was focused across the board. And I'm just going to read off some of the numbers just so that you have a better sense of what the Hispanic community has been thinking. And for many of us, it's almost intuitive, right? We know that the Hispanic community has more conservative, is naturally, inherently more conservative in their values. But this is one of the first times that, we've been able to document it, right? So what we found was that on the partisanship side, that 36% of Hispanics that participated in the poll self-identified as Democrats, 31 self-identified as independents, and 26 self-identified as Republicans. Then we asked the question where they saw things from an ideological perspective. Where do they sat, where they sat on the ideological spectrum. And the responses came back very different. 36% of these Texas Hispanics self-identified as moderates. 34% self-identified as conservatives, and 24% identified as liberals. So as you can see, it's almost flipped, between the partisanship identification and the ideological consideration. And then furthermore, obviously this is a poll, and we asked a whole bunch of questions, and their responses on a variety of issues also came back with more of a conservative leaning, and it was on a whole host of different issues, whether it's the contrived terminology of Latinx to parental empowerment and school choice, to support for the police, and border security, right? And the responses all came back leaning more conservative. So I want to, take that, and I want to start with you, Orlando, because I know that you've done subsequently a follow-up polling, and what's your take, on that, on that difference between partisanship and ideology, and how do we move forward?
Well, I mean, I've always looked at politics and trying to move voters as no different than, products on the grocery store shelf. I ask people all the time, why does Coca-Cola, after, 100 and something years of existence, continues to advertise? It's because you want to drive the message, right? You want to continue to have your market share. And so it's important that we drive a conservative message to a community in this state that is naturally conservative, but the conservatives haven't done that. And so we've seen the community fade away and slide away, and, and again, good for us. The other side took them for granted. You hear that time and time again. So what we found out in our poll is 1,200 registered Hispanic voters in Texas, but we focused on 3 regions of Texas. We focused in the RGV South Texas. We focused on suburban and exurban Texas and rural Texas with high Hispanic growth. We found out the economy and economic prosperity is like top of the list for them. For females 35 to 65 married, security is the most important thing. That means they don't want to defund the police. They want strong border security. When they asked how do they self-identify to their friends, overwhelming majority of our respondents said they identify as Americans. The second category was they identified as Texans. We found out that, surprisingly, most were pro-choice, particularly women. We also discovered by surprise there is a huge support for oil and gas industry in the state of Texas, particularly when you're talking about areas, right, jobs, economic opportunity, and upward mobility. We also found out as the generations live here, the longer they live here, the more they move out to the suburbs and exurbs, the more they vote like their neighbors. And so the longer they're here, the more conservative they become. That's why education is so important in this state. That's why conservatives need to pay attention to education, because that gives everybody a fair chance and an opportunity to participate in the free market and have economic upward mobility. But our poll was similar to yours, Rafa, and TPPF.
Yeah, and that's great. And you want to be able to see that, right? You want to be able to, replicate, the information and see, to want to verify it. And then also, as you move forward with polls, you want to see if there's, any difference. Now, George, I mean, you're somebody who lives out in the field and you're constantly talking. I mean, does that resonate with you and the people that you talk, just the regular, mom and pops and, abuelos y abuelitos that you talk to?
Yeah, actually, the poll that y'all commissioned as well, I right away I was resonating with it because I'm out on the ground as a grassroots organization. I'm knocking on doors, especially right now, talking to folks about the issues that matter. And we did a campaign called the True Cost of Washington Tour, where we went to different parts of Texas and the country, but specifically here in the Rio Grande Valley, we partnered up with grocery stores and we gave away in one of them $105.86. And the other was $52.93, which represents The $105 was a whole week's worth of groceries because of the increase of inflation. The $52 was half a week's. And there was two different grocery stores. We had Congresswoman Mayra Flores with us. We had a line. I got there at 7 a.m. There was already a line in both of them. I believe the one in Brownsville we did, the line they said started at 5 a.m. There was a need. And what we're seeing is that economic policies, and we know this, everyone here, that economy is top issues for us. So if we just had MSNBC do a docuseries where we were on it and they were talking to the people in the line about why they were in line. We weren't just giving away the money to give away money. That is only good for one day, right? But we were there actually informing the community, why do we have inflation? What policies are driving up the cost of goods and services? So we were talking about too much government spending, of regulations, and how regulations on energy has increased, obviously, our energy prices, but also because of that, partly groceries as well. So it was an educational time. And when we had the Congresswoman there, she was there as an official sitting Congresswoman talking about what she plans to do as a member of Congress to reduce inflation and talking about we need to rein in government spending. So that's what we're seeing. And it's exciting times right now, especially.
Yeah, and that's interesting. So, and then one of the other tidbits that we had from the poll that we did, and this is again back in February, so I'm sure that this is just increased over time with what we've been seeing, is that we asked about inflation, and that obviously it's a big issue, right? People are struggling to make ends meet, right? And it's a very real issue when you're struggling to make the rent payment, when you're trying to get food on the table, clothes on the back, on your kid's back. And when we asked that question, 68% of the Hispanics that we polled thought that inflation was caused by bad policy. But what was even more telling was that even 58% of those Hispanics that self-identified as liberals thought that inflation was caused by bad policy. So we're seeing, this shift, this internal shift in thinking, right? That they're realizing that policy matters. Policy matters. Alex, how do you see the economy and the inflation, impacting the work that you do over at HRT and HLA?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think these guys hit it. We've looked at 4 or 5 different polls, including Orlando's. I mean, the economy is number 1, number 2, and job security and personal security on average. Some Texas polls and national polls, it's hard to find a close third. Family issues are important, pro-life issues are important, but they, as a percentage, they drop down pretty dramatically. I was going to take a little bit different take on this, Rafa.
Sure, please.
One of the things we talk about a lot on our board as the state has evolved. I'm from Puerto Rico originally, so we've got 2 out of 3 aren't even, from Texas. I never met anybody of a Mexican background till I went, my freshman year at Rice, and we were a bunch of us having, 17-year-olds having ninfas on Kirby, because I know where that is. And a friend of mine from Ohio asked me, "Hey, what do you like on this menu?" I said, "I have no idea. I've never eaten any of this stuff. I've only been to Taco Bell." No, it's a true story. And so, my mom was in advertising for decades. She worked for a pretty large Hispanic market focused agency that worked for all the big companies around the country. You'll know them from Houston. And the way Hispanics were viewed, 25 years ago, right? I remember when I was little, there was a show on TV called Que Pasa USA, and it was Cuban immigrants. And then there were telenovelas, right? That was kind of it. It was very monolithic, right? So let's take something in English, translate it, just put it out, and it'll be good, right? And I still find it interesting when we talk about Texas and Hispanics. The Valley is super important. That's a huge population, but the state has changed, right? I live in the most diverse city in the country. I think there's about 30,000 people from Venezuela who live 20 minutes west of me in Katy. They just got here.
Yeah.
Katie's fun. Brazilians, Cubans coming in huge waves, from every country. So you got to think about it a little differently. And I kind of break it down into probably a couple different ways, right? There's, and Hispanic Heritage Month is timely, right? Are there folks whose parents or grandparents gave them some Hispanic family values that they need to reconnect, right? That's kind of one, right? That's a whole different approach. And if you were in marketing and you were selling a product, right? Or if you're conservative and you're trying to promote your values, how do you connect with that group? Secondly, you have folks that are new to the state, new to the US, whether or not they speak Spanish. Why did they move, right? That's a whole different set of issues, but largely, economic. And then there's the folks, and Orlando, you kind of touch on this, that may have waned in out of the party because, hey, they had some values, but they were ignored. They were ignored in political circles or ignored by, people who are in the marketing community. But where their natural home should be around conservative issues, conservative organizations, right? So at least three, you could probably, slice and dice it a couple different ways, but at least three different big clusters of folks that need, or, conservative values are naturally what they think about, what they believe in, but how you make that connection has evolved. And in Texas demographically, right, since the last census, Hispanics grew, you guys know these stats across the country and in the state by a higher percentage than the next three demographic groups combined. It's pushing 20%. Nationwide, it's just over 40% in Texas, but the mix is different. And, the legacy folks who, hey, my parents, and my grandparents and their grandparents, grew up in the Valley. That was probably how Texas viewed Hispanics, with little pockets here and there. And it's completely changed. And I think to some extent, there's some commonality in the issues, but there's differences, right? I mean, I lived in California 3 years. I had no idea of, California Hispanic politics and stuff, right? Or agendas, right? Very different in Texas, very different than in the East Coast. And a lot of that is converging. Both coasts are converging on Texas. Plus, immigration, legal or otherwise, is converging, plus the new generation. So it's evolving really quickly. We're seeing some of the same issues in the polls, but I think the approach and the connectivity is probably one of the biggest challenges and opportunities.
Yeah. And so let me just follow up on that, again, those of us that have been around this issue and realize, the Hispanic community is not a monolith community, right? It's just not one thing, right? And you were touching upon that, right? I mean, obviously you not only have people of various national background origins, right? Whether they're Mexican, Cuban, Puerto Rican, Venezuelan, a whole host of other Latin American countries. But I would say even, within the Mexican American population, you have a lot of differences, right? You have the Tejanos that have been here since before Texas was Texas, practically. And then you have subsequent waves of Mexican American immigration into the United States from the 20s and 30s, and then through the war years and after the war years, and then also coming in recently up until this very day. And those people, each one of them come with their own mindsets, right? There might be some similarities, but they also come with their own mindsets, right? And then not only do you have these different waves of immigration, you also have, these people's individual background, right? Not country-wise where they came from, but are they, more educated, less educated? Are they rural people? Are they more urban people? And when they come into the United States, where do they settle, right? Do they settle, along the border in more rural communities, or do they go to the big cities of, Houston, Dallas, and San Antonio, right? So, and that also influences their makeup and their and influences their mode of thinking. So, these are all things that we need to take into account as we're talking to folks. And these are the people, and and as you mentioned, not only people who are coming to Texas from outside the United States, but coming to Texas from different parts of the United States as well. And there's a little bit of a culture shock there. So all those things are very important as we're moving forward. But I think that one of the things that, at least to me, has shown, I'm going to pivot here a little bit and return to talking about issues, is this issue that has really, quite honestly, caught fire in the United States, over the last, election cycle, which is of parental empowerment and school choice. And I think that for the Hispanic community, education has always been something that's been, pretty important. And they, and many of them see it as a key or an avenue, for future success. And one of the things that we found in the polling that we did back in February was that 78% of the Hispanics that we polled believe and support in the concept of school choice, right? Of being able to have the ultimate control and be able to decide where your child is able to go to school, and basically have those tax dollars that are specifically allocated for education to follow the child to the school of the parent's choice. And that 89% also agreed that parents should have access to the classroom materials, right? They want to know what their school districts, what the teachers are teaching in the curriculum. We saw that, and it played a huge part in the election in Virginia, and we see that all across the country, and particularly here in Texas, where you have a lot more people being involved in school board races, and in education committee races, because parents want to know. Okay, I think that unfortunately for a while, parents have kind of abandoned that, and they've kind of left it up to the schools. But then they realize that, hey, there's something not right there. And it's something that we found that even 2/3 of self-identified Hispanic liberals actually agree with. Again, turning back to you, Orlando, how do you see that?
I kind of lost the question.
I did.
I know, no, that's fine. I know it's about
parental
education.
empowerment and school choice among the Hispanic
I
community.
think any parent presented with that option is for anything that improves the quality of their child's education. I think a little more outside the box. I think, for example, that there are issues that our leadership in the state of Texas can address that disproportionately affect the Hispanic community. I don't know if you guys know, but I held a press conference in front of the third largest school district in the United States, the Houston Independent School District, where I called on the governor to take action and take over the half dozen failing schools that had year after year after year received a failing grade from the Texas Department of Education. I was physically assaulted by the left. You can YouTube it and Google it. This is how tough these people are. But let me just say, from a broader perspective, I think there are issues that we as conservatives can address. I'm a free market guy, but I am stunned. I am stunned at the level of which for-profit universities take advantage of young urban kids. I am stunned. And no one has picked up on that and said, wait a minute, we do not allow a mortgage company to take advantage of borrowers. Why would we let for-profit universities practice predatory practices in the state of Texas, strap young urban kids and poor kids with $20,000 worth of debt, which is ultimately going to be nationalized because it's going to be passed on to us, with credits that do not transfer to any state accredited institution. Now the kids have debt, they become disillusioned, they don't get a college degree. That to me is an issue that, as a matter of public policy, we should be addressing in this state. But yeah, school choice. And again, I'm a free market guy. There is There is a space for for-profit universities, but I don't like the predatory practices on our urban poor. And most of these kids, their parents never went to college. They didn't pay somebody to prepare an essay. They didn't have a prep course for the ACT or the SAT, and they get roped in by these recruiters of these for-profit universities. And it's just, to me, it's just astonishing. So yeah, any parent would want school choice. They want charter schools. They want the money to follow the child and the parent. We're all for better education. And as I said earlier, if we don't educate and give everybody an equal education in this country, we're in bad shape. So we need to address that.
Yeah, and I also want to give time to George, because I know LIBRE has also been very involved for a long time on this issue of funding students and not systems, right? So if you can tell us your perspective and some of the work that you've done in that regard.
Definitely. Thanks, Rafa. Actually, one thing I didn't mention, you all obviously know I'm from California. I was born in Monterrey, Nuevo León, Mexico. So none of us actually, obviously you're property of the US here, but we're outside of the mainland, right? My parents brought my family here, our family, to seek a better version of our American dream and to seek better education. My parents were not involved in a lot of like my homework growing up. They were too busy. We were working in the fields, hard work for very little pay. But now as a parent, I see what my kids, and I saw it during the pandemic, what my son was being taught because everything was online. And I'm really involved now. I never thought I'd be like that, but I enjoy it because like, hey, this is my son that you're educating here. And we want to see education not be defined by the zip code you live in. Everyone, thank you. Our children deserve the best education possible. So if school A is the better option, but you're stuck in school B and you're paying property taxes over here, I like to give this one example. I'll be quick.
Sure.
Is this, when I'm talking to people on the ground, I give them an example of, if I want to eat McDonald's, do I go pay Burger King? No, right? I pay McDonald's. They're the ones that deserve my money because I want their product. But I'm not, why should I be paying Burger King? It's the same with school districts. And when I'm talking to pastors, they get a kick out of this one. If I am being fed spiritually at church A, but I'm tithing in church B, is that fair? No, right? So that's what I'll say quick because I know we're running out of time.
No. And I appreciate those, those examples. And George, I just want to stay with you for a second, because I know that we're starting to run short on time, and I definitely want to get to the ever pressing issue of border security. But if you can just tell us a little bit about the project that you guys are working out recently in El Paso regarding taxes and referendums.
So our field director in El Paso, grassroots engagement director Carla Sierra, saw a need in the community. The local hospital district was trying to pass a new tax. It was going to be the biggest tax passed on to people in all of Texas by using certificates of obligation. Basically, they were going to try and go around without having to get voter approval, which in 2019, because of property tax reform, if you want to raise taxes in your city official or county official above a certain percentage, you have to get voter approval. So they were using certificates of obligation. You can still get petitions. So we partnered up. We got the 25,000 signatures that we needed to stop this tax from coming automatically. And now the board there, October 3rd is meeting whether they want to hold this election, this bond election this November, or if they're going to hold it 6 months when there's less people likely to show up. So we're still fighting that, but at least we put a stop to that because they wanted to increase the at a time when inflation's so high, the amount where people can't afford it. We decided to say, you know what, we're going to get involved. And now we have over 34,000 signatures since then. People are obviously waking up.
Right. Government accountability. What a concept. That's great. Fantastic work. So I'm going to close out and with the last question. Obviously, being in Texas, we can't escape, unfortunately, the issue of what's happening on the border and border security and how that specifically impacts on the Hispanic community. Alex, through HRT and HLA, what have been some of the things that you've seen, regarding border security and, the impacts on the Hispanic community? in particular?
Sure. No, huge issue, whether it's, some of the candidates we support or some of the messaging and information we put out. Like I said, we're pushing close to 300,000 confirmed Hispanic voters, Texas residents that follow us and interact with us. So that's always kind of at the top of the charts. It's, in the news every day. I'd say it falls under the category of, personal security, which we see resonated a lot. Following laws, law abiding, that always is very high from a feedback standpoint. But it's also the stickiest issue,
Right.
honestly, and we talk about it a lot on our board and with our members. I don't think anybody would debate the law and order side, but at the same time, you have folks here who have crossed or who are here, on some other program legally. Their kids are the Hispanics of the future. And so it's a very delicate topic where from current residents, Texas residents, that's 75+%. Hey, keep the border secure and everything. But how do you actually deal with the practicalities when those folks are becoming basically permanent members of the Hispanic community in Texas and their kids, right? And you get into lots of subtleties of, what is the traditional dry foot policy for Cubans, that are now coming over the border versus Venezuelans who are, fleeing and emptying out from Venezuela for obvious reasons, and a totalitarian government that's taken over, and they're looking for liberty, right? So hugely important. I don't think it'll go away. We don't see, other than, keep the border secure and so forth, a clear path to resolving it from a policy standpoint. And even within, conservative circles, you see quite a little bit. The one thing we do say in membership, you've got to stay clear of anything that is xenophobic, right?
Right.
I mean, because, boy, most of us in the room, our grandparents are 1, 2, 3 generations maximum removed from coming from somewhere. And I think that's something from, the conservative wing of politics, and I how to describe it, Rafa, that takes a lot of education. It's not as clear cut as, hey, cut my taxes, right?
Right.
That's probably the stickiest issue.
So,
gotta be careful.
and thank you for that. And, and I hate to, put you guys under the gun, but, Alex, George, I know that you live in McAllen, so you're right on the front line. And just very briefly, because we really are out of time, but, just in a minute, just, and specifically on the border security side of it, right? Because they're two separate issues that that obviously get interrelated, but you have border security and you have immigration, but specifically on border security, if you can, touch about that.
So the LIBRE Initiative wants to see border security, and I live on the border, as Rafa mentioned. I want my family safe, and the people I talk to on the ground also want their families safe. What we need, though, what we advocate for is a mixture of border security, more technology, more agents on the ground, more infrastructure, a mixture of all of that. That's what we talk about, the approach you take, but that alone is not going to solve the issues of people coming here. We also need to update our immigration systems to meet the labor demands of not just today, but in the future.
Great. And Orlando, I'll give you the last word on this.
Well, I'm a taxpayer on the border. I pay taxes to a school district, to the county, to the municipality in Kinney County, which is Brackettville, Texas, between Uvalde and Del Rio. And I've lived and worked out on the border since 1976. We bear the brunt of illegal immigration, but that's just looking at a tree in the forest, but here's the real problem. U.S. policy is creating a permanent underclass in this country, and of millions of people. And the danger for our democracy is that we're not a country like other Latin American countries where you have enclaves of opulence, beautiful homes surrounded by gated communities, cut glass on the top of the fence to keep the hoi polloi, the rest of the people out that are too poor to afford housing, healthcare, and education. And that's what this government is creating by creating a permanent underclass of millions of people that happen to be majority Hispanic. That's dangerous for the democracy. That's dangerous for the republic. We cannot stand for that. And so we've got to make a decision as a country. Are we going to continue to feed cheap labor into this operation, that's what it's all about, or we're going to hold to border security and honor the Constitution and the rule of law? It's a tough decision, but we as leaders need to make those decisions because we've had Republican leadership and Democrat leadership, and we've had this issue of immigration now as far back as I can remember for more than 4 decades. And so the problem can be resolved tomorrow if Congress wanted to, but we don't.
So obviously border security, very important, and it's the hallmark of any sovereign nation. And, with that, unfortunately, I mean, it's a very weighty topic. Unfortunately, we didn't, do it justice with a short amount of time, and maybe we'll do another panel specifically on that topic. Let's move into questions. We have about 5 minutes left, I believe, to take some questions from the audience. And yes, sir, go ahead.
So I am, first of all, very, I say a no-brainer, so grateful that TPPF has brought a resonant subject and offered real clarity. It's like, wow.
Thank you.
The only problem, which I want to submit to all the folks up here, when it goes to the media stream, it gets jumbled, turned around, butchered. You guys got any idea that I can point to my friends and family where you can actually hear the real story on radio, a newspaper somewhere, or is the media just ran off and hijacked everything?
Well, I know that these people are, on the media, very frequently.
Yeah, I mean, that's the crux of the issue, right? So it's a great movie. I don't let my little kids watch it, but called Gangs of New York, if you guys remember it, but it depicts Tammany Hall with the Irish coming over, right? Come over, here's how you vote. This is what you believe in. Sign here, sign here. We'll give you some bread, give you some food, right? There was a vacuum in New York in the early 1900s. It was one party, one set of views, and that ruled the roost. I think we have that challenge right now where there is that information vacuum from a conservative standpoint. So messaging is huge. But if you look at just the last, like 12, 15 months, all of a sudden, probably everybody in this room is a white supremacist, KKK member. Like, wow, that's incredible. But how does that stick, right? I mean, it's so absurd. You might as well say, we're all Martians or something, right? But it gets put out by media, it gets put out by a certain set of views. I don't think that, there's a lot of efforts. I don't think there's a strong, counter movement or strong enough counter movement in the media, print and press. And that's why all these efforts are critical, right? It's, if you ask somebody crossing legally or illegally, why are you coming? Well, I want a better opportunity for my kids, my family. I believe in, God. I'm coming over. I want a job and I want my kids to go to good schools. But if the first thing they hear coming over is the, 2022 version of Tammany Hall, forget half the country, they all hate you and, want to lynch you. It's crazy. And, we'll take care of you over here as long as you vote for us in perpetuity. That's the problem I think we're trying to overcome. I don't know of any specific great, national level media outlets that are, giving the obvious facts and fighting this distortion. But it's a huge challenge for every topic that we talked about today.
All right. I think that we have time for just one more question before, our program ends. Yes.
Yes. Thank you. So I've been out speaking with individuals. I'm running for state rep, and I'm just curious when I heard, the longer that we have our Hispanic community living here, generations, they move out to the suburbs. What is it that one thing that, God willing, I'm elected, I'm able to, in addition to partner with organizations like yours, what's one thing I could do for those communities to help continue to share that conservative message and how important that is for policy and education to be there.
Orlando.
Well, I mean, you know, if you're elected or when you're elected, you will continue to implement the values and the pledges that you made in your community. But, you know, Texas is chock full of issues that are affecting the Hispanic community. Some of you may know this. I'm just shocked that our public policy leaders don't get it. Obesity and type 2 diabetes is crippling our economy, because undiagnosed and untreated type 2 diabetes leads to circulatory problems, renal failure, cardiac, blindness, amputations, and ultimately death. And it is expensive as hell to treat. I come from a county that has a publicly supported public hospital. We have to treat everyone. Rather than putting all guns on deck and addressing this issue through the Texas Department of Agriculture, because that's one of the charges of the Agriculture Commissioner, is nutrition and promoting agriculture in Texas, getting National Institute of Health research grants down here in Texas through our 2 senators and our congressional delegation, which is huge, and tackle the issue of obesity and type 2 diabetes. And so you can fight for those issues. There are issues that particularly affect low-income Texans, and we need to address it.
Well, thank you. So with that, unfortunately, we're going to have to close our program. Certainly, there's a whole host of different issues that have a Hispanic perspective that we can devote individual, panel programs to, like the healthcare, like border security, inflation and the economy, and certainly parental empowerment and school choice. So hopefully we're going to be able to move those, forward in the future and have these great individuals with their organizations at the forefront of the conservative movement, pushing those conservative values. So if you're interested, please, I encourage you to not only look up the Texas Public Policy Foundation, but the Texas Latino Conservatives, the LIBRE Initiative, and Hispanic Republicans of Texas and Hispanic Leadership Alliance. So with that, thank you all very much and muchas gracias. Thank you, sir.